Welcome to Language TED Talk. I'm Summer, your host and co-founder of Cathoven AI, your AI grading buddy for English writing and speaking. Today, I'm talking to Will Polese from ELSA, a company that is rethinking pronunciation and fluency training with AI. Will's worked across edtech giants like Udemy and now leads strategy at ELSA, where the mission isn't just about sounding better in English. It's about unlocking confidence and global opportunities through speaking. Welcome, Will.
Thank you, Summer. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, so I've had a fortunate career, that spans a few continents and countries over the last, 30 years. I'm speaking to you today from Tokyo, one of my favorite cities in the world. But I've been in international business and variety of sales and marketing leadership. I'm fortunate now to work for ELSA as their chief revenue officer in charge of their B2B business, which is growing super fast. And I have found my home in EdTech. It really is the last place I honestly thought I'd end up in, but it's where I have the most passion and enthusiasm for.
What was your personal spark, the experience or moment that first got you interested in language education and led you to ELSA?
I mean, back to my connection here in Tokyo, I got on a plane with less than 20 minutes of Japanese language practice back when I was a university student
Uh-huh.
and dropped myself into Tokyo. And I went through a 48-hour sort of intensive program. It's called Aisatsu, which is the Japanese word for introductions, right? Which
Hmm.
is very formal here in Japan. And then I met my homestay family. And I got, we did my little introduction. They were very pleased. It was a mother and her daughter who I'm still close friends with more than 30 years later. But that story, I got in the car and she asked me in halting Japanese how much Japanese I had studied. At least I figured that out later. Then asked me again in a simpler sentence, and then finally asked me in English. And
Hmm.
I answered none. And the look on her face, because Japanese are pretty good, just her jaw sort of dropped and she looked out the window. And I was so embarrassed that I was like, I want to jump out of the car at this point. And I
Uh-huh.
said, you flew, 20 hours, 8,000 miles or X number of kilometers to get here, and you did almost nothing. And this person's been practicing English for months in anticipation of your arrival. And I was so embarrassed that I leaned in hard to learning Japanese and now speak it fluently, which is great, but it took a lot of time. But I bring that back because at ELSA, we have 300 employees. Only 10 of us are actually native speakers of English. Everyone else is speaking English. And I specifically look to hire people that
Hmm.
speak English as a second language, because if you don't have the perspective of what it's like to learn a second language, I will not hire anybody who's monolingual, period, because you don't appreciate the struggles of learning a language and what it means to not have the same vocabulary, to lack the confidence to raise your hand when you're not in your own language. And so, why you asked my original question about the sort of spark for being in ed tech, I had not even heard of it as a space until I got a phone call from a recruiter, and I
Uh-huh.
started listening to what Udemy was doing. And again, transforming lives also through, skills and learning. And I realized when I met them and I watched videos of people and I talked to CHROs, and you met someone at the beginning of the year and then you met them again at the end of the year, and you saw that progression of confidence and their ability to speak, it was very tangible and visceral, sort of impact of what you can actually do. And
Hmm.
then when you look at the research where they get about a 40% pay bump, increase
Mm.
once you learn to speak English. There is no single skill in the world. Maybe Gen AI is becoming that next skill, but English is the best way to change your life forever, your family's life, everything. And so when I found and made that connection, I'm like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to sell anything that doesn't have a direct impact on the people, and I want to leave the world a better place.
Actually, not only English. I also read research and showing the data when people learn another language and their salary will have a certain amount of
Absolutely.
increase. Yeah.
Yes, and it's not, yeah, thank you for, yeah, it's not only English, for better or worse, is still the language of the world that's still
Yeah.
being spoken. Maybe it will be Chinese, maybe it'll
Mhm.
be French, who knows what language it will end
Yeah.
up as, or maybe we'll have enough AI to make it unnecessary.
For us, for our company, Cathoven as well, we don't hire people who are not trilingual.
Trilingual. Oh, you've raised
Trilingual.
the bar even higher. Okay.
Exactly. And we find that it's very fascinating how people say learning a new language is kind of shift your identity or
Yeah.
even the way you behave, you talk. I don't know, when you're speaking Japanese, does
Hmm.
it change your personality?
It does. It's funny. I was at dinner with a colleague that I've worked on and off with now for, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. He said, "Well, when you speak in English, you're American, but when you speak in Japanese, you're softer, more subdued." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, Your mannerisms change. Everything about the language you use is more polite, more humble." And I was like,
Hmm.
"Huh, okay." So
Yeah.
yes, it absolutely is different. My family regularly says, "Well, speak to us in Japanese. We like how watching you speak. We like watching you bow, just because it intrinsically there's all those things kind of kick in without even sort of realizing."
Do you
So,
want to say hello in Japanese to our
yeah,
Japanese audience?
sure. Konnichiwa, yokoso. So thank you, good morning and welcome here. So, yeah.
Indeed, it sounds different. But when I'm speaking Cantonese, Cantonese and
Yes.
Mandarin, they're different. When I speak Cantonese, I sound a little bit less smarter because I'm like,
Really?
yeah, I guess it's because I'm cautious about what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm worrying about it. And so my tone sounds a little bit like softer.
Yeah.
So Elsa has made a name for itself by focusing on pronunciation. Why do you
Yes.
think that part language learning needed a dedicated AI solution?
Well, I mean, the story, for Elsa ties back to Vu, our founder, when she was at Stanford. And, she's a brilliant person. She was valedictorian for her class in Vietnam. She got the opportunity to travel to the US and study.
Hmm.
And she's like, I opened my mouth and nobody understood what I said. So she's like, it doesn't matter, how smart you are if nobody understands you. And that understandability, I'm sure there's linguistically a better, more fancy science term for it, is the critical piece. And for her, it was over $200 an hour to hire an accent coach to teach to get rid of an accent. The same kind of people who teach accents to actors for movies, right? So the American can sound British or Singaporean or what have you, right? And it's like, this is outrageous. I can't afford this. There's a app that can, there's got to be technology to solve that. And so with Chavi, our, co-founder, they
Hmm.
said, let's solve this and using machine learning, personally annotated a model because what they discovered is that you Japanese speakers and Chinese speakers and all consistently make similar accent mistakes, right? And so that you can actually train the model to understand that, and the model corrects the accent, but more importantly, it understands you. So our automated speech recognition is, best in world for
Hmm.
beginners, right? And why that's critical is confidence comes from actually ha not being shut down, right? Not hearing that, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't understand you, right? And so the ability for someone to not get dismayed, or as we discussed again here, there's no eye rolling, there's no facial commenting that because I mean, people are humans, they get tired of doing that. So there's AI never gets tired of saying that is the 50th time you've made that mistake, but there's never any acknowledgement of how much you struggle with that. And AI can give you the hyper personalized feedback that humans just aren't capable of. So, we can literally have, 60 million people download our podcast. Every one of them or downloaded our app. Every one of them gets different feedback based on their specific accent problems. And AI is uniquely suited to solve that. From there, we've moved into conversation and a much broader set of skills. But accent is the single biggest thing that stops people from understanding you. And as you probably know in your own research, it also means people think you're dumber and they respect you less, and frankly, they pay you less. And so it's a, it snowballs into a very
Yeah.
bigger, much bigger problem.
Yeah. How many accents are there that you can recognize in Elsa's app?
Uh, Close to, I don't know, 190 different accents.
Uh-huh. How did you train that? Like you got the data from somewhere?
Yeah, we're now over 8 billion minutes of recorded English that we have done in the lifetime of ELSA.
How about
So
at the very beginning? How did you get the data?
at the very beginning, every time a new accent, well, we solicited to get people with different accents and actively, but then we would train the model with human linguistics people, would listen to it, denote or can annotate the difference between what was said and what was said, and just
Mhm.
personally taught the model how to distinguish the two. But there was no secret sauce. It was just a lot of hours of time.
Mhm.
And frankly, that's why, and I tell this to my team, well, that's why we're not into teaching Spanish. We're not into teaching French. We haven't started teaching Mandarin because it requires a data set to train the model. We don't have the data set to do
Yeah.
that. And frankly, it would be starting over and you'd get very average feedback, which
Mhm.
many of our competitors still deliver because they have not trained their models in the
Mhm.
detailed way we have.
Yeah, data is the fuel.
It is
What,
the fuel indeed.
yeah, what is the one surprising insight you've learned from watching how millions of learners using ELSA?
I mean, the most surprising thing is confidence, is more important than anything. And I give you an example of, again, here in Japan, we have a CHRO of a large pharmaceutical company,
Yeah.
and he uses the term globish. And I said, "What is globish?" I said, "You mean you're teaching English?" He said, "No, no, we teach Globish." I said, "Globish is a company. There's more than one of them, but
Uh-huh.
it's not a language." He said, "No, it's global English." I said, "What is?" He said, "Global English." He said, "Yeah, the term means just show up, open your mouth, and talk. We don't care if your grammar is correct, but we tell the native speakers, people like yourself, you have to speak simpler, slower, you know, don't use fancy words. And our team in Japan and Europe and everywhere else will do their best to speak, but nobody gets judged, and they do specific training on the quality of their English. It's just the fact that they are willing to speak in English is what we're celebrating and rewarding. And
Yeah.
so we've told everybody, and we've done, again, a lot of training to reset that expectation. But all of our clients, and this happens in Indonesia, they said, "Well, we don't care if they speak well. We just want them to speak." And I didn't really understand that that was he said, "I just got off a phone call. There was 30 people in the room on the line with my team. And we had a presentation from someone in English, and these are very smart people. They are very talkative when it's Bahasa. And
Yeah.
then someone asks, does anybody have any questions? And
Silence.
total silence, right? And I said, I was so frustrated because I'm like, I know they have questions. I know they have great comments. They have insights, but because
Mhm.
they lack confidence, and that confidence multiplies or when they're in front of their peers, right?
Yeah.
And that again, back to AI and back to your solution, our solution, the fact that you can practice in private and there is no judgment makes AI such a wonderful solution because people are in their bathroom or they're in their bedroom and they're comfortable to practice. And so when they do get to that room full of folks conversation,
Mhm.
they've practiced for hours by themselves and they actually have more confidence. And that's what people want. They said,
Yeah.
just get my team talking and I'll consider this a success. I don't need Seaford level jumps. I just want people talking. That's the
Mhm.
first and most important thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because I actually think confidence is one of the most under-leveraged metrics in language learning. We track
Yes.
fluency, accuracy, scores, but confidence is the thing that decides whether someone even uses their skill in the real world.
Yes.
Yeah. And the tricky part is confidence isn't built by correcting every mistake. Sometimes it's built by
No.
feeling seen or safe enough to keep
Yes.
going. When
Correct.
introducing ELSA to educator and institutions, what helped
Sure.
shift their thinking from traditional methods to embracing AI-driven pronunciation tools?
Yeah, I mean the best way to convince educators are tough, right? Because we started 4.5 years ago selling here in Japan and with schools, and those teachers were
Mhm.
like, no, no, I don't need any technology. I have everything. And you know, and we said, just try this out. And we actually hired, and he's one of our so six an ex-English teacher
Mhm.
is actually who is our number one salesperson here because he understands exactly what they're going through. And so he said, we're not here to change anything. We're not here to take away your job. We're actually here to take away the boring things that you don't want to do. Would you
Mhm.
like to have a tool that can actually help learn vocabulary, practice pronunciation, word stress, intonation, all
Yeah.
the things that you mentioned with every one of your students over and over again so that you can actually see them progress, get better. And all the hard work that you put into it is on the parts that matter, not on the boring stuff. And so it's that sort of efficiency augmentation play, but it actually took showing them and
Yeah.
and then it's frankly they learn from each other and it's the networking effect. Right now, the schools say we don't need to talk to any ELSA salespeople. We just talk to this school, and Shibuya is one here that everybody cares about. And like they said great things, so we're good. And I'm like, okay, great, that's fine. But they're the very high bar.
Mhm.
Similarly, on the enterprise side, although different, people are like, well, I don't know. People learn from humans, right? People buy from other people. And I said, sure, but again, if you want the flexibility. And here in Japan, it's about executives in taxis, right? It's a great amount of time. They love practicing
Mhm.
ELSA in taxis because it's quiet and again, nobody's listening to them. They can
Yeah.
do it at home. They can do it at set. They don't waste an hour commuting to some classroom somewhere, or they hate the exercise when they have an instructor coming like, oh, my boss just scheduled a meeting, so I have to skip my English tutoring class, right? And the person's sitting, so there's no flexibility, right? And once they
Mhm.
start to think about that sort of ROI based view on their time, and time, as we all know, is the most valuable resource you can have.
Yeah.
That's what got them to do it. But we don't ever tell people that this is a replacement. We have lots of clients. We're big fans of blended learning. They may have 1,000 employees on ELSA, but they have a subset of their top talents, as they tend to
Mhm.
call them, with individual instruction. And we've found, particularly like in markets like Indonesia,
Mhm.
that if you have a weekly call,
Yeah.
there's that accountability that I don't think AI has yet really tackled. How to make someone show up on a Thursday or a Friday for the meeting with their peers where they have to give another 2-minute monologue in English, but they have to prepare for it, right? But the fact that they've got that group session that's recorded and there's a native speaker there, they love using ELSA to practice, but they've seen actually better results, greater proficiency improvement
Mhm.
by combining that 1 hour session with, what might be 2 or 3 hours of practice during the course of the week or whatever they do on average.
Agree. I talked to a professor from Arizona State University.
Mhm.
She also made some very interesting point that she said that AI actually create a safer place for practice, and sometimes,
Yes.
yeah. So I think like AI tutor is like your best buddy, the one who
Yes.
does not judge, who lets you mess up, and you have a wound outside. Let's say you judge by your friends, and then you go
Yes.
back to heal a little and build strength quietly. So
Yeah.
yeah, when the students, let's say, step into the classroom or the workforce, the meetings, the real world, that is like a battle because they are very unpredictable. But they actually have been practicing secretly with their buddy,
Yeah.
so they're
Yes.
ready. Yeah.
They are ready.
Yeah.
And that,
How would you differentiate yourself, like Elsa, with other um, pronunciation or speaking tools for workforce? Or
I mean, for the workforce, we've done three things. One is that the feedback is the personalization. That's still, if we ask clients uniformly around the world, is that we actually get the best feedback from ELSA. And so the
what do you mean
specific
best feedback?
the best, most detailed, actionable feedback. So particularly here in Asia, right? People don't want, hey, good job. That was, here's a score. They want to know at a word, at a phoneme level, a structure, show me specifically where I made the mistakes and then what I need to do to correct them. So Elsa's feedback across fluency, intonation, is unparalleled in terms of giving that level of answers so clients know exactly what to work on,
Hmm.
right? And second, because of that speech recognition, it actually does an incredible job of encouraging people to keep speaking, right? We just launched with, Vietnam Airlines, and 94% of the students, or in this case, students, learners, excuse me, you know, are active every single week in the first month because they're like, they immediately practice and they see the progress and they get the feedback and they're recording videos and sharing it with their colleagues. And so,
Mhm.
that immediate feedback loop is what really important. I think there's still more we can do there, but we really do a very good job of encouraging people right away to learn, and they see that score change and they go, oh, you were 72%, now you're 78%, now you're 80%. They continue to
Mhm.
get that kind of
I
feedback.
see.
We're not the only ones doing that, and that conversation is much more interesting than just saying we provide English training, right? And so that's an area that we've leaned heavily into and that CHROs specifically respond to.
Great. So you basically put a measurable goals for learners and also a
Yes.
measurable goal for the enterprise for the
Yeah,
decision.
because we see a clear connection between if I do better in English, am I going to get a promotion? Am I going to get paid more? Am I
Yeah.
going to get to meet the CEO? Show me something that gets me recognition, and that motivates people because most people are kind of lazy when you look at it, and they say they want to start something, but we all know, they go to the gym at the beginning of the year for a few weeks, maybe 10 days, and then they give up and they go right back to doing things. It's hard to change your habits.
Yeah, yeah. The motivation is not simply not big enough. Okay. Is there a thing that you feel like people should stop thinking about language learning?
Stop thinking about language learning. I mean, that there's a shortcut for it. That's the thing that they should stop thinking. And I hate to see it all over, these TikTok and other social media. They're like, in 8 hours you'll be speaking fluent Mandarin or, Swahili. And I'm like, it just doesn't work that way. But people are gullible. Same way you can't lose 10 pounds in a day, well, unless you cut off of your leg, maybe you can, but I mean, the, everybody wants these immediate shortcuts, and language learning still requires time. And countless studies, our own VP of Learning, Kirsten, will tell you as well that there is no substitute for practice. And so you have to put in the time. All of our best cases come from people who put in the time. There are those who are better at it and faster, and you do see the variability on the graph where someone can spend 30% less time and make progress at the same rate or better than their peers. But
Mhm.
just because something about their brain is wired. In my case, I pick up languages pretty fast. My accent, I can repeat words in Korean and in Thai and other things. People are like, wow, how long? And I'm like, I just my brain heard it and I can parrot it back pretty
Mhm.
well. But
Mhm.
I can't, I'm learning Bahasa and it's slow going because I am very intermittent
Mhm.
in when I practice it. And so time, you have to put the time in if you want to learn language, and Gen AI or nothing is going to eliminate that.
No, yeah. Actually, because I feel like language learning is not just about learning the language, it's about practicing your muscle, your tongue muscle, and
Yes.
also your brain. Like when I'm speaking Chinese, even speaking Chinese, I need to warm up my brain, warm up my muscle. Right now, so for a long time without speaking Chinese, and I feel like, oh, it's not that fluent.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I agree. And the second language is or it's your first language. If you're not using it, it takes a moment to switch gears here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Do you have a bold or unpopular opinion about how pronunciation is traditionally taught in language education?
um, yeah, I don't know if it's unpopular or bold, but
Mhm.
AI is absolutely the right solution for learning languages. And the fact that the whole world hasn't recognized that is still baffles me. And so, you can practice for real world conversations with Gen AI, and you can practice everything and anything that you want. And it's not going to stop you from being a fun, interesting person to hang out with. It's
Yeah.
actually just it's going to help you. And I don't know. But technology, people have irrational fears that it's new and it's different. And I know all the psychologists have hundreds of studies and decades of research that show this, but it's like I try to reassure people that it's the best thing ever for them to embrace and take advantage of. And I have three children, and I am shocked and dismayed sometimes when I'm like, take it. You have this incredible tool. If you are not investing in it now, you
Hmm.
know, you can lose your job. And so I think it's okay if it eliminates jobs. If it makes, people level up, I think that's a good thing, and
Hmm.
we shouldn't be afraid of that. So, I look at it constantly as an individual leader, as a co-owner, as a part of the leadership team at ELSA and other companies I advise. It's like, can this position be filled by solved by Gen AI, or does it need a human to do it? Or what better part of the job does the human focus on, because Gen AI takes the more mundane basic tasks out of scope. And so maybe not radical or revolutionary, but something more people should lean into and not be afraid of.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, Duolingo, Louis Vuitton, just,
Yes.
yeah, he posted that in the future, if you want to get employed by Duolingo, you have to prove yourself that why what you are doing cannot be replaced by AI.
No,
Yeah.
I'm hiring for an executive role now, and the one of the screening questions is your, AI maturity and capability. What do you know? And show me an example. And I've given our recruiters and the way we do, I say, look, if they answer this question with what I call, sort of primary school, kindergarten, to use the American term, level of response, like I use Gen AI to create content. And I'm like,
Mhm.
are you joking? I mean, that's like saying I use Excel to sum up numbers. It's like, I'm like, come on. If that's as far as you've gotten, then yeah, we're not hiring anyone now without who's not Gen AI, friendly, curious, and has demonstrable skills. Not expert level, but has
Mhm.
already done projects, demonstrates what works, doesn't work. And yes, it's a high
Mhm.
bar, but just like we feel it's important to have people that are bilingual, or in your case, trilingual. If you don't have some level of Gen AI fluency, or at
Mhm.
least intermediate skills,
Yeah.
then you won't get past the first interview.
Yeah. Well, we do have some teachers that they say that, oh, the conversation that you have with AI is not genuine. And then I always fight back, like, what you are practicing in the classroom are not for real world purpose sometimes
Exactly.
either.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
It's just as pretend as Gen AI's conversations are, but yes.
Yeah. All right. Then it's about you. So, what is the hardest leadership lesson you've learned since joining ELSA?
Um, I don't know. It's since joining ELSA, I'm not sure I've learned new lessons, but it's more about, I focus a lot on what Brene Brown talks about, the vulnerability side, and not being the know-it-all. And so it's always telling people, it's like, I don't have the answer. I think that's a great question. I'd like to go find that answer.
Mhm.
That Thank you for asking. I
Mhm.
wish I had asked that. I'd like to know the answer to that question also. And
Mhm.
so I think that is underrated, and there's still too many executives out there who continue to not admit when they don't have the answers to things that they try. To me, that creates a better culture and a better connection with the team. So that's something that I continually lean into,
Mhm.
and I try to get my, sort of direct reports to practice more, because I've got folks that still haven't accepted that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage. Is there a piece of advice you received earlier in your career that you find that you want to pass it to other founders or other C-suite person or other young entrepreneurs?
Beyond the, talking about what you don't know, one thing that I learned in terms of presenting,
Hmm.
which I've always, taken to heart, is, and this is specifically relevant in front of a audience where people typically are listening to me in a language that's not their first language, right? Is the ability to communicate succinctly and the power of the threes, right? It's like point number one, point number two, point number three, and really over-indexing on clarity of communication versus trying to sound smart, right? I've was presenting to at a board meeting the first time, gosh, I don't know, this is going back 15 plus years ago. And I was reading slides and and someone said to me, and these are the two words I repeat, which is so what? I said, really? Yeah, I said, so what? I said, what do you mean? I said, you pictures, so what? What's the conclusion?
Mhm.
What's the decision? What's the question I need to answer and conclude from this? Tell me the so what. Don't just show up and throw up with information. Actually, tell me the so what. Synthesize this thing and say, what do I care about? What does the client care about? What is the decision we're trying to make here? And keeping in mind that what the what the end state looks like and what decision you're trying to make makes for much better presentations, for much clearer communication. So I always ask people to say, look at the slides, what's the so what, and make sure that those slides will be, if slides are even going to be what we continue to use, but will they speak for you when you're not there, right?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
I said, and this is particularly in sales, right? 80% of the time, you're not in the room when the conversation's going on. They have all your materials, and that's why people send around video links now, which is brilliant because they don't hear your voice. And so if you're going to send something in writing, you really need to make sure it's clear and understandable
You.
because you're not there to explain it. And so I've really focused on training people on how to communicate effectively in written format as well as spoken format. I think that's the biggest underrated skill.
That's so good. I definitely learn a lot because I feel like sometimes I just bring a news to people and then
Yeah,
it's asking so what, or people do not have the uh, boldness to ask me, so I have to ask myself.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
great. Thank you, Will, for joining our language tech talk. I'm sure that the audience learned a lot from
I
this.
hope so. I'm always learning. That's what I like to say. Stay curious, right? Like Ted Lasso says, be
Mm,
curious, right? Not judgmental. Or Walt Whitman, whoever supposedly said that quote.
great. Thank you. Have a nice trip, Will.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.